The Lunar Guardsman. By Krimmer. Chapter 28. Manehattan. Excuse me, miss? Can we have some more chips and a few more nuts, please? Rainbow Dash called out to one of the waitresses as they passed by their table. Thanks. Applejack emptied her mug and finished off the last of the chips before taking another good look around. She had been feeling a bit apprehensive when they first came in this bar. She didn't have anything against them, it was a good place as any to relax in Manehattan, and this one kept its music down. Most of the ambience came from the loud mumble of the patrons talking, and the endless tinkling of glasses. But it simply wasn't the place you'd expect a princess to come and have fun in. She thought with a shrug, depends on the princess apparently. Luna seemed to like this kind of place, and she couldn't really fault her. There were ponies all around, yet they still had their privacy, had a nice selection of drinks, and they were with friends. Applejack glanced at the deeper depths of the booth where Luna had sat. Once again, the area where she stood had become noticeably darker, but that fit her just fine, hiding her from view. What the other patrons saw was an indistinct figure of a pony, sitting next to the much more noticeable figure of Rigdan, who had to pay a little bit extra at the barkeep since his armor would probably scuff the furniture. All in all, however, they were such a big and diverse crowd that no pony would take much notice. They had piled more than one table together near the booth to accommodate all of them. There was Applejack herself, as well as the rest of her friends, Luna and Rigdan, Solid Charge, Eventide, Night Lily and Drumbeat, though Eventide and Solid Charge were up at the bar and away from the rest of them. The rest of the Lunar Guards had stayed behind at the hotel, holding down the fort. Applejack pulled the fresh mug of pleasant cider the waitress brought her closer to her. Poor fellas! She hoped they made good use of room service at least. Rarity hadn't been able to keep her tongue in when she found out in which hotel they would stay while in Manehattan. Applejack didn't get most of it, on account of doing the old nod and smile trick with some care though. She didn't want to get roped into something she didn't want to do, but the one thing she heard was that they had very good chow. The waitress brought a few more trays of snacks, and Applejack got hold of one for her very own personal use. Thank you kindly. Rigdan leaned forward, examining the chips. Are these made from actual potatoes or are they made from hay too? He asked. Pinkie Pie grabbed a hoofful and threw them in her mouth. Hey, she announced after laborious chewing and 3 more mouthfuls. The alien pushed it away from him and got a tray of dried nuts instead. I'll never understand how you can possibly prefer substituting potatoes with hay. Hay has less empty calories, Rarity said. She leaned to the left and then to the right, examining Rigdan's black cowl that covered his head. Is that working well for you, darling? Are the holes large enough? I really wish you had let me take measurements without those ghastly bandages around your face. It's fine, he said, downing some beer. He shook the little flap that covered his front lip. Have a little problem with this when eating or drinking, but I'll get used to it. Where were we? You were going to tell us about little Spiky Wikey. Oh, yeah. Well, he's going back with Celestia for now. Velvet wanted to take him in, but she was only going to spoil him. Not that Celestia won't, but at least she'll keep up his punishment for a couple of days at least. Oh boy, Rainbow laughed. What did you have him do? I didn't have him do anything, Rigdan said, taking one more swig. I simply suggested to Celestia that if Spike wants to act like a baby in constant need of supervision, then he should look the part. Oh. My. Gosh, Rainbow Dash mouthed in laughing disbelief. You didn't do anything. It's not my fault Spike will be helping Celestia around while wearing a baby bib and holding a rattle. Oh my sweet stars, he'll look adorable. Rarity squeaked. I ain't saying that ain't funny, but isn't it too much? Rigdan's eyes sparked with anger. He was going to follow behind us in the wilderness. In the dark. Without telling anyone. No, that isn't too much. A day or two of humiliation is a very good trade if it makes sure he won't try something like it anytime soon. He breathed out his frustration. Anyway, that's it for Little Flame. What else were we talking about? You still haven't told us if you asked Princess Celestia about gaining access to her reports, Twilight grumbled half-heartedly. Ah, right, he breathed, glancing at Luna. I did. We couldn't break the code anyway, not fast enough. A moment of honesty, if we may, Luna added. We couldn't tell heads from tails. Yeah, that too. So, I went and told her, there was a little argument, and afterwards she told me she'd let us know what we need or if anything popped up until she could teach Luna how to read them. Night Lily was throwing nuts aimed at Drumbeat's open mouth. He turned around to ask a question and a nut hit him in the eye instead. What exactly was the argument about, if we may ask, sir? He said, rubbing the hurt eye. Nothing much, same old. Told me I should know better, I said some words, she said some words, I said more words, we punched each other, made up. Argument over, Rigdan said, shrugging nonchalantly and laying back on his seat. Twilight frowned. Punched each other, she quoted. Rigdan leaned forward again, towards Applejack. How does my left eye look? Applejack peered carefully through the eye-hole of the black cloth. Swollen, she said after a few seconds. She frowned in recollection. Is that why Princess Celestia had her mane all over her eye? Did you really sock the princess? Oh, like it's the first time she or I did that. Did you forget all the times she set me on fire? He said, lying back as much as his armor would allow him. We get on each other's nerves from time to time. It settles things between us faster, and we don't hold a grudge about that at least. He examined his drained beer and turned to Luna. Should I get another one, you think? You should hold off. We're supposed to go to another place after this, remember? Just one sip, why? What's wrong with this one? Pinkie Pie asked, stopping her struggles to convince Rainbow Dash to let her drink some of her alcoholic beverage, rather than the lemonade she was sipping from with a straw. Nothing, but there are some rumors about more entertaining venues, Luna said while using her magic to lift a bottle of whiskey away from Pinkie Pie's hooves, who whimpered in disappointment. All right, who's up for another drinking contest? Rigdan, hand down. You're not allowed to play. Pinkie Pie, neither are you. Applejack gently shook the loser of the previous round. She hadn't checked if she was still breathing for a few minutes now. A roaring snore reverberated through the bar, signifying that Fluttershy was still very much alive. I really thought she could do better than a single shot, Rainbow Dash excused herself, rubbing the back of her head. Applejack didn't say anything. She just glowered at Rainbow Dash. Hey, at least she's getting a nice nap, hey. I'll play, Princess, Drumbeat offered. Splendid. White teeth glinted in the darkness in a predatory smile. Let us make it more interesting this time and leave these little thimbles aside. Can some pony get me 2 tall water glasses instead? Drumbeat's eyes filled with instant regret. Night Lily patted his back consolingly. Not to worry. I know how to work a stomach pump. Not helping, he whispered, watching his glass get filled with whiskey. Can I add some water? He hopefully asked Luna. It spoils the taste, but suit yourself, Luna said, downing her own glass in 3 swift gulps. Your turn. As fun as watching a pony commit suicide by drinking was, Applejack switched her attention to Twilight and the rest of her friends. They talked mostly about what they intended to do if they managed to get the time. There were libraries and museums that Twilight wanted to visit, and fashion stores that Rarity wanted to browse. Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Pinkie Pie preferred to walk around and drink in the sights. Fluttershy would probably ask to visit animal shelters and the famous park in the middle of the city. The conversation brought them around to the grand tour the mayor of Manehattan offered Princess Luna, and by extension the rest of them. They had shown them some grand sights that they all wanted to visit again in more relaxed conditions. They laughed at the memory of how the officials sweated seeing Luna's seemingly indifferent look, urging them on to make even wilder proclamations for their city and the monuments they showed her. Luna had kept responding with "that's nice" to everything she was shown. It drove them all kinds of crazy. "This reminds me," Twilight said, prodding her former guardian, "why were you looking everywhere but what they were showing us? Were you trying to get on their nerves?" "Hey? Oh, that. No, I was simply looking around to spot what they didn't want us to see," Rigdan answered, trying to sneak the whiskey bottle away from Luna's side. "Ya think the ponies here are hiding something?" Applejack asked. Luna's hard hoof unexpectedly came down with force on Rigdan's fingers. The alien inhaled sharply through his teeth at the sharp burst of pain. "You little..." "No. Yes. I mean," he paused to shake his aching fingers. "They probably have things they want to keep out of sight. It's why they might have wasted all our day like that. I don't think it's anything sinister. Probably didn't want us to look into their dirt and all." "What did you mean about the buildings?" Rainbow Dash asked. Rigdan's little jump didn't escape Applejack's attention. "What buildings?" he asked innocently. "You know," Rainbow Dash continued without fail, "when you pointed at them and told Luna that it's like that the further you go from Canterlot." "I didn't hear that," Twilight said. Rainbow Dash put her hoof next to her mouth in a parody of keeping quiet. "He whispered," she hissed loudly. "It was nothing," Rigdan assured them, giving up on the harder stuff and getting his watered-down beer on hand again. "Just an observation." "Of what?" Twilight asked. Rigdan looked into the remains of his drink. "It's like a dream that fades at the ends. Like it frays apart. Or a web that isn't wound as tight around the edges." He looked up at the ceiling. "I think it's a honey trap, one that no one ever decided to build. A story that isn't being told as loud out here." "That made zero sense," Rainbow Dash said. Rigdan shrugged. "I'm not sure it means anything at all. Not on its own, oh hey." He lifted up an arm in a wave, welcoming back Solid Charge and Eventide. "Any luck?" Solid Charge held out a seat for Eventide before he sat down himself. "It's not far. I got directions and a password." Eventide grinned happily. "I wish I felt a little better. I'd like to take part if we're going there." "All right." The cloth on Rigdan's face shifted as he smiled. "Everybody finish up your drinks, and someone carry Drumbeat to the bathroom so he can puke. We're leaving in a bit." Luna's head swiveled away from her one-sided contest, her face full of excitement. "We found one." "Found what?" Pinkie Pie asked. "Something fun," Rigdan answered. Solid Charge went into further detail. "There are a couple of places, all of them kept secret, that host underground that is illegal fights. We found where one of them is located." Applejack frowned. "So? Y'all want to shut them down?" "Heck no," Rigdan said. "And lose out on the fun? We're going to take part." Rarity harumphed, full of disappointment, and sipped on her wine. "How crude. That is no place for ladies, and certainly not a princess. I'm cross with you for even making the suggestion, darling. Asterisk. Rip off his head. Mama needs a new silken shawl." Rarity screamed over the chanting crowd, riding on top of Solid Charge. Bits were exchanging hooves rapidly, scuffles were igniting and ending in a moment, and the two contestants in the middle of the crowd-made ring were grappling against each other. The brutish minotaur that Rigdan was facing managed to break his grip. He pushed Rigdan back and threw two savage punches, one on his chest and one on his right cheek, sending him stumbling sideways. Rigdan wiped his bleeding mouth with the back of his hand and spat blood on the floor. "All right," he said loudly over the din. "Let's try this again. I think I had enough." He straightened up and beckoned for his opponent to attack. Then he placed his hands behind his back and waited as smugly as he possibly could. The Minotaur, and the crowd betting for him, roared their anger at this display. The Minotaur, a beast much larger even than Solid Charge, with bloody eyes, trampled forward, bringing his massive fist back for a punch that would break Rigdan's neck. Rigdan took a step towards his charging opponent, and, hands still behind him, looking relaxed as you please, kicked downwards in a casual manner. The Minotaur's expression switched from one of fury to one of surprise and immediately after to one of exquisite pain. A dry snap echoed in every pony's ears despite the shouts. The leg broke like a twig, and the lower half of the bone ripped through the flesh, exposing itself to the air. The crowd oohed in sympathetic pain before going wild, and large amounts of bits and other currency quickly moved from losers to winners. Rigdan was patted in the back by the suddenly richer spectators as he waded through them to reach the tables they had reserved for themselves, where half of them had decided to stay and keep an eye on their seats and Rigdan's armor instead of watching the brutal matches. Surprisingly enough for Applejack, Rainbow Dash was one of them. Applejack sat next to Fluttershy, who had leaned onto Drumbeat, both ponies switching between drunken awareness and unconsciousness. Still, it might have been better for Fluttershy not to have a recollection of this place. It was not a bar or a proper establishment of any kind. Hey, the oldest barn in her farm was in a much better condition than this old dingy basement they found themselves in, and she was willing to bet this place didn't officially exist. She wasn't sure about the drinks either. They were broad-capped bottles, sure, but the amount of dust on them? That didn't bode well. Beer is not renowned for aging well. Rigdan fell on his seat with a dazed but content smile, and spat some more blood on the floor, making Twilight and Rarity frown. He mumbled a quick apology to both of them, and got hold of a napkin. "How did you do?" Luna asked. Rigdan showed 6 fingers using both hands, all 4 of his left and 2 on his right. "I managed to take 6 hits. Only needed 1 to take him down." "Darnation," Luna said, striking the table with her hoof. "If my next opponent doesn't fall on the first strike you might win." "Where's your manager?" Rainbow Dash asked, chuckling. Rigdan leaned back on his chair, trying to see around the crowd. "I think she's okay, she's coming back." Rarity came back to their table with a number of filled pouches in her magic and a dazzling smile on her lips. "Wahaha! We made a killing, darlings. Oh, these poor ponies here have no concept of the art of business. Oh, Rigdan, I'm sorry, but after the latest match there's no pony willing to fight you. There's an earth pony that wants to take on Lulu the bat pony though." Her smirk could make Discord proud. Luna smiled wickedly. She couldn't have taken part as an alicorn, no pony would be crazy enough to try and take her on, so she used her magic to look like a thestral instead. She simply had to stay away from Rigdan and his grabby fingers to keep the spell up. Applejack would have called it cheating, only it really wasn't, was it? Not anymore. The disguised princess headed for the makeshift ring. "I'll be back in a minute," she said full of confidence. No pony, except for Rarity, Rigdan, and the 3 thestrals who rushed ahead to make some last bets, followed. Rigdan held back for a moment to crouch next to Rainbow Dash. "You haven't watched a single match so far. You coming?" Rainbow Dash tried to play it cool, waving her hoof like she didn't care, even though her sudden jitters were visible to all. "Nah, I just got comfortable. I might come here someday on my own, show them a thing or two." The biped pursed his lips and glanced at Applejack and Twilight, who tried to shrug back without making themselves obvious to Rainbow Dash. Rigdan didn't force the issue. He ran his hand through Rainbow Dash's colorful mane, who tried to push it away from her and pull away, and rushed to catch the show. The crowd cheered. There was a cacophony of oohs and ahs as the match went on. Then the volume rose up and split in exultations of victory and the grumbling of the losers. Over everything else they could hear the happy shrieks of a richer Rarity. Luna returned a couple of minutes after she left, grinning. "So, Applejack asked, curious of how their little contest ended. She shrugged and blew her mane away from her face. Rigdan won by a few points, but I still had fun. Rigdan nodded and started to put on his armor once more as soon as he sat down. Solid Charge started helping him, and the rest started slowly getting ready to leave, and convincing Rarity to abandon her new booking business venture. The alien paused midway in the act of putting on his gloves. Applejack looked where his attention was, and noticed Luna was pouting. "Don't tell me you're upset you lost," Rigdan said, stretching his fingers inside the creaking material. "No. I am simply disappointed we didn't have a chance to get in a proper bar fight." Applejack and Rainbow chuckled while Twilight shook her head in exasperation. "No matter. It would not even be satisfying enough without good opponents anyway, so I should probably let it fade out of my mind." Rigdan hummed in thought and finished wearing his gear. He gave his weapons to Applejack and Twilight, and bid the girls to wait by the entrance. He caught Rainbow Dash by the tail and pulled her back next to him when she tried to follow them. "You, young lady, are staying here with me. Don't leave my side." "What are you planning, big fella?" Applejack asked, full of suspicion. "Me? Nothing. I'm just going to thank these lovely people for having us," he said. "You're not gonna start anything, are you?" Rainbow Dash warily asked. "I'm not sure if I." "Okay, girl." Rigdan grabbed Rainbow Dash by the cheeks and turned her face towards his. "Wake up and stop running away from your shadow. You're staying right here, and getting these stupid ideas out of your head." "Phew I. No buts. You either hit back or stay chicken scared for the rest of your life. Your choice. It takes two to fight, not one." And with that proclamation he let Rainbow Dash drop, and jumped on the table, the wood creaking dangerously under the increased weight of Rigdan and all the heavy armor he wore. The attention of every pony was instantly on him, a mix of ponies, griffins, and minotaurs. The din died down, and every pony waited while the last of the noise faded. Rigdan spoke up loud enough for all to hear, and every pony listened to the odd being with the crowned helmet they had heard so much of these last few days. Applejack had a feeling that she should be pushing her friends as close to the door as possible, effective immediately. She had been near animal stampedes, and there was a feeling she got, right before it started. Like a kettle that was about ready to start screaming it was. She felt that way now. "Ladies and gentle stallions," he said with a sarcastic tone, making every pony who heard him laugh at the term. "Thank you all for the entertainment you have provided us with, as well as the gift of your company." Some of the listeners cheered. "Also, thank you for your hard-earned bits." There were some grumbles, but mostly laughter. "Alas, we have to go and seek another form of entertainment. The sad fact of life is however that bits don't grow on trees, so in the interest of finding the cheapest solution available." Solid Charge took a step back. "Oh crap! Oh crap, don't tell me he. I have one question to ask of you." He flipped a bit up in the air and caught it again. "Where can I find your mothers? I hear they're the cheapest ones for miles around." The large basement was completely silent for one moment, a silence so deep it could deafen you. Then the crowd surged forward like a wave. Rigdan jumped down laughing, while Solid Charge and the three Thestrals formed a defensive line. Applejack urgently shooed her stunned friends out, pushing them if need be. Rigdan pulled Rainbow Dash right next to him. Last thing Applejack heard as they were running up the stairs was Rigdan shout. "Here's your bar fight, Lulu. Grab a chair. That guy looks like he has a sturdy back. Asterisk. Ow. 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 Oh ow 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 ow." Rainbow Dash complained in rapid sequence as Applejack dabbed her cut. The farmer spat out the reddish cloth and looked her friend up and down before slapping a small bandage on the side of her head. "You're reacting like a little filly. It ain't that bad." Rainbow Dash, in her usual fashion, couldn't keep her hoof away from prodding the fresh wound. She pulled her hoof back as soon as it made contact, and hissed. It stings. Yeah, well, might have to do with ya trying to block a beer bottle with your face. Applejack closed the small medikit and gave it back to Eventide, who stood a little apart, watching with a smiling face. Thank you kindly for this, Eventide. Good thing some pony thought of bringing one along. Not a problem, the older mare said, putting the medikit back in her saddlebags. You should thank Captain Leafstream. She gave it to me. She said, no way, that won't be needed at one point. Applejack laughed, shaking her head, and lightly kicked Rainbow Dash right on the cutie mark. Come on, get up you. It's no good sitting on dirty pavements. Dirty pavements? You sit on the ground all the time back home, Rainbow Dash pointed out. That's because that's honest Ponyville dirt, Applejack said proudly. Steeped in tradition and history. It's dirt where hard-working earth ponies have shed their sweat. She pointed towards Rainbow Dash's flank. Besides, ya sat down on gum. Ah, pony feathers, Rainbow Dash said, jumping up. She turned around herself like a dog hunting its own tail as she tried to check her coat in the darkness of the night. She quickly headed for one of the scarce lit lamps, flying funny on account of keeping her flank as still as possible. Applejack turned to Rarity. I am surprised you didn't offer to cast one of your fancy lights and help her. Oh, she can deal with it on her own for once, and I don't want to touch any yucky gum, Rarity said, shivering in disgust. She smiled warmly immediately after. It's good to see old Rainbow Dash again though. Yet. Seems like she needed to see that not every kick leads to lifelong injuries, Applejack said, walking next to Rarity. Gonna have to thank Rigdan for that, though he kinda was the one who terrorized her like that. She looked around and spotted Twilight. Hey, Twilight! Where are the rest? Are we calling it a night or is there anything else on the menu? Applejack called out. They're just around the corner on a bench. I was coming over to get you actually. I think we're heading back to the hotel now. Twilight led them back where she came from, just around the street corner like she said. The streets on this area were pretty deserted. Applejack had gotten the sense they were in one of the less reputable areas of Manehattan, proven by the entertainment they left behind. Even so, they barely had seen any ponies around all night. It wouldn't be that unusual normally, but every pony talked about how Manehattan was alive day and night. Proved to be a soap bubble too, Applejack thought, at least for a large part of it. She could see the night sky light up at the northern side, from all the lighted districts that were brimming with life, tourist traps, clubs, bars, and everything else that could skin some bits off you. So she was pretty surprised when she saw a pretty, young, earth pony mare talking to the others. She had a light pink mane and a yellow-green coat. Applejack noticed the very short skirt she wore that hid her cutie mark from view, a simple piece of clothing of bright pink. Oh, Rarity said when she noticed her. Is something the matter? Twilight asked. Rarity's cheeks blushed pink. Oh, my apologies. I didn't intend to demean any pony. Hey! The skirted mare had been talking to Solid Charge, who was trying to wave her away, all the while blushing way more ferociously than Rarity did. The young pony looked rejected for a second, and then, despite Solid Charge's attempts, stepped up to Rigdan. She looked up to him and said something Applejack couldn't hear, her stance full of agitation. Rigdan, for his part, seemed to be amused judging by the way he stood. They reached them right on time to clearly hear Rigdan's answer, almost laughing. Girl, you're barking the wrong tree. Sorry, not interested. Oh, the mare said, looking at the ponies around. She seemed to reach a decision and made 2 steps towards Applejack and the rest. Would any of you want to have some fun? My price is low, I'm willing to do anything you want, and I have a room if you don't wish to go to a hotel. Pardon? Applejack said, completely flabbergasted. Did that pony just say did she mean what she thought she meant? Pinkie Pie hopped out of the darkness and into their midst. Did any pony say fun? I want to have some fun. Rarity's eyes widened and she lunged to hold off her pink friend. Not this kind of fun, darling. I'm sorry, dear, but we're not interested. Rarity turned her head just so her face was out of sight of the young mare, and whispered. She's a pink skirt, girls. A working mare. Applejack blinked. Why was that wrong? She was a working mare too. Oh. The sentences and hints she heard reluctantly clicked into place. She had heard of these mares, but as far as she knew they didn't, advertise as such in small communities. Supposedly, if you needed them you knew where to find them, if that was your liking, but in bigger cities there supposedly was a buyer's market, and there was a lot of competition, city folks being all weird and all, which meant they had to go and seek their clientele. So, the pink skirt had become kind of known, at least as an euphemism, though Applejack, until this very moment, thought it was more of a joke than a real thing. She wondered if there were any such working ponies in Ponyville. She hadn't heard or seen anything, but she had a nagging suspicion ponies wouldn't rush to tell her if there was. She was known for being opinionated on certain topics, though she never gave real thought to this one. To say Applejack felt extremely awkward was a vast understatement. She had a whole list of things that came to mind, ranging from what would your folks think, to how can you do this, and she knew each and every single one was not getting out of her lips if she could help it. She was pretty sure this mare here didn't need to be preached from her or asked questions she probably asked herself already. Would be nice to convince her brain of that fact too, and make it stop making up a whole sermon she would never utter. The mare did not intend to let an client get away from her that easily. I'm sorry, miss, but if your friend wants to try me out you should let her. Try me out. Applejack rolled these words in her mind a couple of times, getting the full taste of them, and leaving a greasy stain behind. Yep, she wasn't forgetting she heard that any time soon. She looked at Twilight next to her, and realized, the moment she saw Twilight's eyes be white as saucers, that the poor purple unicorn had completely shut down. At least Fluttershy was asleep again. That was a small blessing. The negotiations were cut short by a very young colt running towards them, and shouting. Hey, sis, are you done with work yet? Did they pay you at the store? The mare's expression showed intense fear for a second, and with incredible speed she moved behind Applejack, hiding her back half behind the larger mare. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be asleep, tomorrow's a school day. Go away, I'm in the middle of an errand. The tiny colt wasn't deterred by his older sister's forbidding voice. Tar says he really needs more of his medicine. He sent me to see if you had money for him. The mare's eyes flashed with anger for a moment, before biting her lips apologetically. Not yet, Storm Drain. I'll be back when I do. Go home. Oh. Do you have a bit or two for me at least, Mint? I'm hungry. The mare tried to dig beneath her skirt while keeping it out of sight of her brother. I think I do. Hold on. Rigdan came forward, hidden from view in the dark with his black armor until he was close enough. He crouched down, next to the small colt that looked up at the giant with his mouth open but speechless. You're hungry, little kid? He gently asked. The colt slowly nodded. I think we can arrange something then. The mare, Mint, shook herself out of her surprise. Hey! No, he doesn't do that kind of stuff. Luna appeared next to Rigdan, cutting off Mint's protests with her mere presence. I have built up quite an appetite. I believe we can accommodate 2 guests. I noticed one of these quick-eat establishments on our way here. Shall we? It's fast food, Rigdan corrected her, standing up. Really? Do we have to catch it to earn our right to eat it? Asterisk. Rigdan was looking down at the hay fries that every pony else was eating with nothing less than complete hate and contempt. If hay fries had a neck, he'd be wringing it for all it's worth. If not them, then he'd probably like to made do with whichever pony ever thought them up first. Can I have some of these? Little Storm Drain asked, pointing at them with his tiny muzzle. Rigdan pushed the bowl towards him and the colt happily started munching on them. The little bell over the store's entrance tinkled. Night Lily walked inside and sat down next to Rigdan. Rigdan silently scooted aside to accommodate her. Where had you gone? He asked with a hint of suspicion. Night Lily dropped a slightly greasy paper bag on the table in front of Rigdan. There's a little place around the corner that does potato fries. Thought I'd go and get you some. Rigdan opened the bag and peeked inside. You did? He asked, completely surprised. Why? The young Thestral shrugged, smiling. I like potato fries more too. Besides, it wasn't fair for us to have fries and you not to. Rigdan kept staring at her and she shifted awkwardly under his intense stare. So, sorry, I thought you'd like it, I didn't mean to. Want to share? Rigdan asked, taking a potato fry in his hand and passing it to her. Night Lily grinned, relieved. Yeah. Sure. She took the fry, and after Rigdan emptied the bag on an empty plate she quickly grabbed a couple more. Can I try some of them too? Storm Drain asked, still chewing. Sure, kid. Here, have the rest of the bag. Mint managed to pull her eyes away from her brother at the table next to them long enough to meet Luna's gaze. Thank you for the meal, Princess Luna, but I need to go soon. I need to find a pony in search of release and a full money pouch. Luna said bluntly, swallowing her bite. She turned to Twilight, smiling. These sandwiches are very tasty indeed. Thank you for the recommendation. Twilight smiled back with ketchup-stained lips and cheeks, pleased that Luna had liked her favorite as well. Rarity was doing her best to remove a small piece of bun that got stuck on Twilight's coat without alerting Twilight to what she was doing. Yes. I need the work you see. Is it drugs? Luna asked, and took a fresh bite without looking at Mint. Excuse me, Princess. Your older sibling. Has he fallen prey under the addiction of drugs? Mint stared at the floor, the question making her blush when offering her body would not. Yes. It's not his fault. Tar tries to quit. He really does, he just slides back. Luna hummed in thought. She finished her sandwich and got up. The pony that was stationed at the nearby register straightened up in an almost military fashion when he saw the princess standing. Luna headed towards an empty corner of the shop and called for Rigdan to come along. The biped stood up, ruffling the colt's mane before leaving. Pinkie Pie jumped on his vacant seat and started amusing Storm Drain by putting hay fries in her nose, ears, and mane. Applejack, not knowing what else to do, tried to strike up a conversation with Mint. She didn't want to make the young mare think she was rude by ignoring her. So, you live with your siblings? Take care of each other. The anger she had seen before made a return in the mare's face before swiftly fading away. Each? I do all of yet. Yet, we all do as much as we can, she said bitterly. She glanced at her brother and her face softened. We're doing the best we can. How about your mum and pop? Mint shrugged. Gone a long time ago. It's been the three of us for a long time. Applejack wondered what exactly that gone meant, but she knew better than asking. She took a look at the next table where Rainbow Dash was roaring in laughter along with Storm Drain at Pinkie Pie's antics. If Rainbow Dash was sitting with them they would probably have found out by now. Illegal drugs statistically end up being the cause of death for 76% of users, which is a general figure of course, the actual number varies according to the exact drug and age group, Twilight said, standing ramrod straight in lecture mode. Depending on the extent of use and duration of addiction, there are a number of afflictions both of body and mind that plague. Rarity interrupted Twilight by gently shaking her shoulder. Twilight, dear, I really think this is not the proper time for teaching us your little factoids. Poor Twilight tried to start again, not realizing how Eniponi couldn't find the studies she had read about helpful at all. But if you pay attention to every study, it becomes apparent how foolish it is to. Rigdan's voice rose up from the corner where he was talking with Luna. That's not what we're here for. Applejack, as well as all the rest, waited a moment in case they heard more, but the two of them had quieted their voices once more. They turned their attention back to their own conversation. The outburst had actually helped a bit. It pulled Twilight out of her mind enough to notice Mint's rigid jaw as she stared at her. I'm sorry, Twilight said, but according to... Ever tried to convince an addict to quit? Mint asked. Do you have any idea how it is? To beg them to stop 1,000 times and to hear them say they will try 1,000 times in turn, only to Mint looked away. It's not easy. It's not that easy at all. She took a deep, trembling breath and returned Twilight's hurt look. I'm sorry. I know you mean well. No, I'm sorry, Twilight said quickly. She glanced towards Rigdan, who was arguing quietly with Luna. I kind of know how it is. I just never really thought of it like this. Applejack sniffed theatrically, and wiped a non-existent tear. Ain't it lovely how we can all come together through stupid? Some decorum, Applejack, please. This is a serious issue for some, Rarity scolded her. Mint, for her part, simply giggled. There is help you can get, Twilight suggested. There are programs and places that can help you stand up on your legs, initiated by Princess Celestia. I've read about them. I know, but they will have to do what they think is best, and I'm scared they'll take Storm Drain away from us. I don't want to lose my little brother, she said under her breath. It might be the best thing for him if they think so, Twilight proposed. Maybe, Mint said, nodding. Or it might not. We do have our hard days, but we make sure he gets more than either of us. He goes to school, and we're together. As family. I don't have anything else. Just them. Kinda hard to argue against that, Applejack said, cutting off any interjections from her friends. She was certain there were none that would help either way. The mare quieted down and went on finishing her own meal. I'm really thankful for the invite, but I have to go. We're short on income as it is and I can't waste a working night. Luna approached Mint from behind, almost causing the mare to soil herself when she heard the princess voice behind her. We're not done yet, young Mint. I would like very much to have a meeting with your elder sibling. Luna went around the table and sat back on her seat. Right after I finish one more of these sandwiches. She pointed at the menu on the wall and asked Twilight. Tell me, does chocolate milkshake mean what I think it does? Asterisk. Rigdan was leading them on, with Luna by his side. Storm Drain rode on his broad shoulder, giggling at the constant barrage of jokes thrown at him by Pinkie Pie, who rode on Rigdan's back. Mint followed behind, her eyes glued on her little brother, her whole body taut and ready to lunge forward if Storm Drain even looked like he might fall. Rainbow Dash followed behind every pony else, carrying Fluttershy. Is your leg okay? Rigdan asked Luna, inspecting the thick bandaged portion near her cutie mark as well as he could in the dark. It is negotiable. Is your residence nearby, young Mint? Luna asked, looking around the deserted streets. She peered longer into the darkened alleys, making Applejack wonder what Luna could see in there with her much better vision. Yes, Princess Luna. Right on the next block. Maybe the streets were not as deserted as they looked. She didn't know Manehattan well at all. She had only stayed here for a few weeks after all, when she stayed with her uncle and aunt, and that had been years and years ago. It had been some time after her parents' death, she remembered. She had thought it strange then, how Granny Smith wanted her to come here. What a silly little filly she was. Her granny always knew that Applejack would want to come back home. She had only sent her away to help her forget, and to make her remember she still had a lot left. Like poor Mint. She must have been even younger than Applejack was, yet she was as hardened as her, and loved her young brother as much as Applejack loved Apple Bloom. Raising a young colt or filly like that, when there is no pony else to take up the role, you stop being the elder sister. That's what ya call yourself, that's how your sibling calls you, but in truth, you're his or her mom. Even though neither says the word, it doesn't make it less true. It was right there for all ponies to see, in the way Mint followed Storm Drain's movement like a hawk. And Applejack? She was an apple farmer from Ponyville, bearer of the element of honesty, and had been quite helpful to Equestria a couple of times. Next to her was a pink-skirted pony that rented out her body for a few bits every night, and yet, she felt like a kindred spirit. Funny how life can be. If she had thought before of how she would feel meeting a pink skirt, she'd probably say that she'd feel, unlike that. Maybe look down on her, probably. Nah, scratch that. She had looked down on her at first. Applejack was real glad she hadn't said anything then. Mint didn't deserve that. She did the best she could with the cards life had dealt her, and Applejack was left with nothing but respect for the mare. "We're here," Mint announced. It was a dump. Applejack felt bad for even thinking it, but that's what it was. The living room and the kitchen were one and the same, and Applejack took a little peek into the cupboards. There wasn't much in there. As in, at all. She did see a cockroach, but left it in peace. Poor thing would starve anyway. The chairs were all different from each other, probably salvaged from any place they could get them. All the furniture was like that. In the smallest room there was a proper bed. She was certain that was reserved for Storm Drain. There were some small toys, all of them battered and old, under it. An aged mattress laid bare on the floor of the other one. The older brother and the sister must have been sharing. Tar, the older sibling, was lying on it in there. He was a grey-coated earth pony, almost the spitting image of his younger brother, but where Storm Drain was happy and lively, he was gaunt and brooding. He laid on the old mattress shivering, despite the fact that it was a warm night. Applejack barely got a look at him through the door before Mint closed it and dragged Storm Drain into his own room, after serving a cup of water to Luna. She was awfully ashamed that this was the best she could offer to a princess. Luna drank it in one go and thanked her. "We're here," Rigdan said, spreading his arms around the small room, outside the bedroom where Tar was. "What do you want to do now?" Luna hesitated. It was only her, Rigdan, Applejack, Twilight, and Solid Charge up here. The apartment was too small for any of the others to come, and Mint was doing her best to get Storm Drain to sleep. "I am not sure," she admitted. She walked around the small kitchen, examining everything. So strange yet so familiar. To have so much, yet to choose to throw it all away like this. "They don't really have that much," Twilight said sadly, poking one of the weathered chairs. It creaked dangerously under the minor touch. "There is always less than that," Luna said, turning the faucet on and watching the water run. She turned it off. "Much less. There are individuals to whom these ponies are wealthier than dragons. Drugs are a very appealing alternative to accepting reality," Solid Charge said. "They can make a cruel life turn bearable for a while." "Have you attempted their consumption?" Luna asked. "No. I've known minotaurs who have though." "How about you, Rigdan?" Rigdan wasn't shy about checking out anything at all. He started opening the cupboards one by one, and even looked into the fridge. "Oh, I've had my share of happy juice. I've also had a lot of bad juice. More often than not it was one and the same. But you never attempted to take drugs of any kind as long as I've known you," Twilight said, glancing around him into the fridge's contents. "Not even medication. Addiction is a bit hard to get over. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I stay away from your drugs in case they work like that on me," not just because they might end up screwing me in other imaginary ways. He shut the fridge. Well, they've got plenty of ice at least. So, Luna, are you going to talk to the guy? Do you believe I would be of any assistance? Luna asked, eyeing the closed door. Would he listen to me? Rigdan shrugged. Meh. Don't think so. You could try scaring him off the habit for a few days. Other than that, I don't think there's a lot you can do. I believe there is. Luna pointed at the door. You will go and talk to him yourself. Rigdan was taken aback. Me? Why me? I believe you will be able to make a better judgment than I could. You shall figure something out. Do it your own way. What you think best. Why do you care so much about them? I am not sure if I do. I am considering a few options that I believe may have been made available. I thought I could find an answer here. Luna pointedly stared at the empty kitchen. Family. Hard choices born by necessity. A mistake that is sinking its teeth deeper with every repeat. An unexpected hoof. I need to reflect on this. I know not what we can do or if we should do anything at all. This is not us. I would like to make an attempt even so, however. All right, Luna. As you wish. He opened the apartment's door and walked outside. Solid charge, come with me. The Minotaur had been watching the exchange with a pleased expression. Where are we going? To find some drugs. Let's see what we can get our hands on if we rub two bits together in the alleys. Twilight wanted to be present. She wouldn't take no for an answer, no matter how Rigdan threatened or cajoled or pleaded. She wanted to see, she claimed. She refused to keep hiding behind Rigdan and Princess Celestia forever. That's what she claimed at least. Applejack didn't see how the mare who went all up in Nightmare Moon's and Discord's face was hiding behind Eniponi. Rigdan, I can't keep letting myself hide away from reality. There's only I can't believe I'm saying this only so much I can get from books. I learned that on my first day in Ponyville. Some things I need to see. You don't need to see anything. He crouched in front of Twilight, and put one hand over her mane, the thumb running across her forehead. Little one, I've seen a lot of things. You have no idea how much I want to never have done so. You can't unsee them. There's a pony in need in there. He put himself there. And if I stay ignorant, I won't be able to help others like him. I'm coming inside with you. Rigdan stood up again, and placed his helmet on the kitchen table. There's no changing your mind, is there? No, Twilight said, grinning. That's not always a compliment, Twilight. All right. Come on. Let's see what I can do. Not much probably. Mint had gone inside already while Rigdan and Solid Charge were gone. She woke Tar up from his feverish dreams, told him of the ponies outside. Applejack had the distinct idea that he hadn't believed her. There had been shouting. A little bit of crying. She didn't get the chance to pay attention to that. Some pony had to keep Storm Drain occupied until the shouting would fade. When Rigdan stepped into Tar's room, tall and dark in his armor, Tar either believed his sister or thought he was about to have the worst nightmare of his life. So, Mint wasn't lying, was she? He stammered. His voice was weak and cracked. He didn't just look sick, he sounded sick too. Sweat ran down his forehead and across his sunken ribs. No. She wasn't. Rigdan walked around the room, examining the almost bare walls, paying no attention to the stricken stallion. There was a small photo pinned on one of the walls. Applejack approached to see it better, as did Twilight. It was Tar, younger and healthier. Mint was by his side, both of them smiling at the camera. A small foal was on her back, waving at the photographer. They were in the countryside, not Manehattan. The sky was clear blue, and Applejack could spot a building in the distance. It could be a barn or it could be a house. The photo was too creased to be able to tell with certainty. Rigdan was still looking at the crinkled photograph. You know what your sister is doing? It was a statement, not a question. She has to. We don't have a choice. Don't you? She's out there. You're sitting in here. I'm sick. Rigdan turned around, looking down at the stallion. Don't give me that crap. I am, the stallion shouted. Applejack and Twilight took a frightened step back. Do you think I like this? Knowing what she has to do every night? Knowing my little brother has had to go to sleep hungry. He pointed his hoof towards the door. I'm trying but I can't. I'm sick, and I'll never get better. He let his hoof drop to his side. I won't, he whispered. You tried. Every day, Tar said, quietly, his sudden bout of anger evaporated. I brought them here. I promised Mint there was a better life here. We came to Manehattan and I did everything wrong. I tried. I really did, but he shook himself in a small act of display. He tried, and that was the result, all there for them to see. It's all my fault. Applejack watched Rigdan sit down on the floor. He carefully folded his legs and rested his arms on the low circle they made. They waited in silence. A minute passed. I had a little girl with me. Tar looked up at him with tears amassing at the edge of his eyes. Twilight turned away, facing the wall. I had to make a choice. A choice that existed only in my own fool's head. I lost her, and I'm never getting her back. Of all the things I've done, everything that happened to me, all the hells I've been through, if I could change only one thing, it would be her. I'd choose to keep her. No matter what. He reached around his belt and took a small paper package out, slowly opening it. You will lose them. You will lose them and you will never get them back, and there is no pain like it. You will cry. You will threaten, you will plead, you will promise your soul to gods and demons, and they will still be gone. Rigdan unveiled a small hill of green dust. Is this worth your family? A speck of sand? A fake, empty promise? You will trade them for this? No. No, it's not worth it, Tar stated in a whisper. Rigdan nodded. Applejack and Twilight smiled encouragingly at the stallion. It warmed her heart to see him make the right choice. To stick by his family. That was easier than she had thought it would be. Tar bent his head. There's a free clinic for ponies like me. I could go there tomorrow. At least. Mint and Storm Drain won't have to look after me, and when I get back on my hooves I could look for a proper job. Rigdan started folding the paper back to its previous shape. But, Rigdan paused. What? He asked suspiciously. I can't go like this. I can't walk or even stand. I have the shakes, you know. The armored figure stayed silent, waiting. I'm ending it tonight. I swear. I just need to make the pain stop. Just one last time. Twilight spoke up, before Applejack could, voicing her own thoughts. You don't have to. Your family loves you and they will help. Rigdan lifted his arm, silencing her. He turned back to the trembling stallion. Is that a promise? Rigdan, you can't. Yes. Yes, I promise. His eyes were glued to the drug his body craved. Rigdan unpacked the dust again, the stallion shaking at the sight. Twilight, Applejack, get out. There's no need for you to be here. Applejack moved next to him. Here now, are you sure about this? Wouldn't it be better to take him there ourselves right now? He promised. I'm holding him to that promise. All right, Applejack agreed after a few moments. You know best. Come on, Twily. Let's wait outside. Solid Charge had sat down on the floor rather than risk the chairs. Mint sat at the kitchen table along with Luna. The young mare looked tired. She'd probably heard what her brother had shouted. There were small, moist tracks on the coat under her eyes. So, what did he say? Twilight was triumphant. He promised to get himself checked in for help at a clinic. Mint guessed. Yet. He says that every few weeks. He means it too. It just doesn't last long enough. She rubbed a stain on the table with her hoof. I'm sorry for wasting your time with the likes of us. Luna had refilled her cup with water and was drinking it slowly, savoring it like Princess Celestia did her tea. Are you any good with cooking? She asked. Excuse me, Princess. Cooking. How good are you with the modern-day appliances? The smile full of sadness that was directed at herself made Applejack's heart ache. Not much, Princess. I can get by, but I don't have much chance to practice. Would you like to? To what? Practice, Luna said. She put down the colored cup and looked the mayor in the eyes. I tire of this back and forth. I am offering you a job as a cook. When we return to Canterlot I will finally have guards of my own. These guards must be fed, and I intend to keep them separated from the rest of my sister's guard as much as possible. Luna pointedly looked around the small apartment. You will also be provided with much better lodgings than these, as well as a salary. Mint looked pained instead of glad. Thank you, Princess, but I can't. I don't know enough and I can't leave my brothers, she almost wailed. Then don't, Luna answered simply. If you make do here, I don't see why you couldn't do so in Canterlot as well. Your younger brother can also aid with small chores if he wants to collect a small payment of his own. During the evenings only, of course. I believe it is encouraged for young colts to prioritize their schooling in this day. Tar will have to face the outcome of his own choices. He's a grown stallion. Your younger brother is not. Mint didn't answer. She stared at the door that led to Storm Drain's room. Applejack added her own 2 bits. Mint, you gotta look after your little brother first. He's the one that needs you most. The mayor nodded, hard enough to shake free the tears she had been able to keep back so far. Thank you, Princess, she whispered. I accept. Luna. Get in here. Rigdan shouted. Applejack moved as fast as she could yet still fell behind the dark alicorn. Luna was further away from the door but somehow made it through first. Applejack rushed in right behind, wishing for a moment that she hadn't. The small package had been thrown aside, the green dust spread on the floor. Tar's mouth was open, and his bed was filled with green-yellowish puke. Small, disgusting tendrils of acrid green and bright red ran down his muzzle. His mouth was open, and Rigdan's fingers were digging inside while the stallion's jaw was trying to clamp down, Rigdan's gloves the only thing protecting his fingers from being bitten off. Tar's limbs were flailing, hitting everything in range. What happened? Luna asked, trotting to his side. Rigdan, take your hand out. He can't breathe. Twilight shouted in distress. Rigdan didn't even look up at them. He's choking. I'm trying to grab his tongue, he fucking bit it, and now he's trying to fuck. His damned throat is blocked with all that solid charge. Applejack, get them the fuck out, he shouted pointing behind her at the door. Where the hell are you supposed to push to force air out his lungs? Luna, try to pull out that sludge in his throat. I'll try to force his lungs to work. What else could she do? She pushed at Twilight and Mint, driving them out with solid charge's help. Mint didn't want to go. She understood, she wouldn't want to go either if that was Big Mac in there, but there was nothing they could do to help. They would only get in the way in here. So she pushed them out, forced them to leave, and muted her ears to Mint's wailing pleas and cries. Rigdan and Luna would fix this. They wouldn't let him die like that. They saved Pinky, they would save Mint's brother too. They were doing their best. Asterisk. Tar didn't make it.